Basketball world is buzzing with controversy as Paige Bueckers faces the most intense scrutiny of her career. While everyone expected her to be the next superstar to revolutionize women's basketball, something unexpected happened that has Geno Auriemma questioning everything he thought he knew about building a championship program. For years, UConn has been the gold standard in women's college basketball. 11 national championships, countless Final Four appearances, and a legacy that stretches back decades. But when Paige Bueckers arrived in stores, the pressure wasn't just about maintaining that legacy, it was about surpassing it. The hype surrounding this young woman was unlike anything the sport had ever seen, and everyone was watching to see if she could live up to the impossible expectations. The comparison game started immediately. Everywhere Bueckers went, people whispered the same question. Is she the next Diana Taurasi? The next Sue Bird? But the comparison that really stung was the one that seemed to follow her everywhere. Caitlin Clark. While Bueckers was dealing with injuries and setbacks at UConn, Clark was setting the basketball world on fire at Iowa, breaking records and selling out arenas wherever she played. This is where the story gets complicated. Clark's meteoric rise created a standard that seemed almost impossible to match. Every time Iowa played, you'd see packed arenas, screaming fans, and television ratings that shattered previous records. Clark became more than just a basketball player. She became a cultural phenomenon. Her logo, three-pointers, and fiery competitiveness turned casual sports fans into women's basketball fanatics overnight. Meanwhile, Bueckers was fighting a completely different battle. The injuries started piling up almost immediately. A knee injury limited her sophomore season to just 17 games. Then came the devastating blow, a torn ACL that would sideline her for an entire season, right when she should have been dominating college basketball. While Clark was lighting up scoreboards across the country, Bueckers was stuck on the sidelines, watching her championship window seemingly slip away. Geno Auriemma, the legendary coach who has seen it all, found himself in an impossible position. He had coached some of the greatest players in basketball history, but this situation was different. The constant injuries to key players, including Bueckers, created a puzzle that kept changing every time he thought he had the pieces figured out. Azzi Fudd, another five-star recruit who was supposed to team up with Bueckers to create the most dynamic backcourt in college basketball, also suffered multiple injuries that prevented them from playing together consistently. The frustration in Auriemma's voice was evident every time he spoke to the media. This wasn't about attendance or fan support. UConn's fan base remained loyal throughout the struggles. This was about watching incredibly talented players deal with setbacks that were completely out of their control. Auriemma described it as trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces kept disappearing just when you thought you had it figured out. But here's what made the situation even more challenging for Bueckers. Every time she stepped on the court, the expectations were suffocating. She wasn't just representing herself or even UConn. She was carrying the weight of an entire program's championship drought. UConn hadn't won a national title since 2016. And for a program accustomed to cutting down nets on a regular basis, that felt like an eternity. The media scrutiny became relentless. Every game was analyzed, every performance was dissected, and every setback was magnified. When Bueckers struggled, critics questioned whether she was really the transcendent talent everyone claimed she was. When she excelled, the pressure only increased because it proved what she was capable of when healthy. It was a no-win situation that would have broken most players mentally. Social media made everything worse. While Clark was racking up highlight reels that went viral daily, Bueckers found herself constantly defending her legacy and dealing with comparisons that weren't entirely fair. Clark was healthy and playing with a complete roster at Iowa, while Bueckers was trying to carry a UConn team that was constantly battling injuries and roster limitations. The breaking point came during several difficult losses where UConn looked nothing like the powerhouse program that had dominated women's basketball for decades. Auriemma, known for his fiery personality and championship mentality, was forced to watch his team struggle with lineups that changed from week to week due to injuries. The chemistry that championship teams require was impossible to develop when key players were constantly in and out of the lineup. What many people didn't understand was the mental toll this was taking on Bueckers personally. She had arrived at UConn with dreams of multiple championships and individual accolades that would cement her place among the greatest players in program history. Instead, she found herself dealing with rehabilitation schedules, limited minutes, and constant questions about whether she would ever reach her full potential. The contrast with Clark's situation at Iowa was stark and painful. While Clark was leading Iowa to unprecedented success and becoming the face of women's college basketball, Bueckers was fighting just to stay healthy and contribute to a UCNN program that seemed to be stuck in neutral. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Two of the most talented players of their generation were having completely different experiences based largely on circumstances beyond their control. Behind the scenes, UConn's medical staff was working overtime to keep players healthy, but it seemed like every time they solved one injury problem, another one would emerge. Auriemma later admitted that he had never dealt with such a sustained period of injury problems in his decades of coaching. The situation was so unusual that it started to feel almost cursed, like the basketball gods had decided to test UConn's resolve in the most challenging way possible. The turning point finally came during Bueckers' final season. Despite all the setbacks and disappointments, she made a decision that would define her legacy. Instead of transferring to a program with fewer expectations or declaring for the WNBA draft early to escape the pressure, she chose to stay and fight for the championship that had eluded her throughout her college career. That decision proved to be prophetic. With Bueckers leading the way and finally getting some help from a healthier roster, UConn made an incredible run to the 2025 national championship. The team that had struggled with injuries and inconsistency for years suddenly looked like the UConn teams of old, with Bueckers playing some of the best basketball of her career when it mattered most. The championship game itself was a masterpiece. Bueckers scored 17 points and grabbed 6 rebounds in an 82-59 victory over defending champion South Carolina, finally capturing the title that had been the goal since the day she arrived in stores. The 9-year championship drought was over, and Bueckers had proven that she could handle the pressure and deliver when her team needed her most. But the real story wasn't just about the championship. It was about how Bueckers handled adversity and criticism with a maturity that was remarkable for someone so young. She never made excuses for the injuries or the team's struggles. She never complained publicly about the unfair comparisons to Clark or the constant media scrutiny. Instead, she put her head down, worked on her game, and waited for her moment to shine. The aftermath of the championship revealed just how much the criticism and doubt had affected Bueckers. In interviews after cutting down the nets, she admitted that there were times when she questioned whether she would ever get the chance to prove herself on the biggest stage. The pressure had been immense, but it had also forged her into a stronger player and person. Looking back, the journey made the championship even sweeter. While Clark's path to stardom was more straightforward and immediate, Bueckers' story became one of perseverance and resilience. She learned that sometimes the most rewarding victories come after the most challenging struggles, and that true champions are defined not by how they handle success, but by how they respond to adversity. The comparison between Bueckers and Clark will probably continue for years, but both players ultimately proved that there's room for multiple stars in women's basketball. Clark revolutionized the sport with her individual brilliance and magnetic personality, while Bueckers showed that championship DNA and team success still matter in an era increasingly focused on individual achievements and social media highlights. For Gino Auriemma, the championship validated his belief that patience and persistence would eventually pay off. The injuries and setbacks that had frustrated him for years suddenly seemed like necessary tests that made the final victory even more meaningful. He had coached many great players and won numerous championships, but this one felt different because of everything the team had overcome to achieve it. The lesson from Bueckers' journey isn't just about basketball. It's about handling pressure, dealing with setbacks, and staying true to your goals even when everything seems to be working against you. In a world that increasingly demands instant gratification and immediate results, her story serves as a reminder that some of the best things in life are worth waiting and fighting for.